A shock of fear went through Denali as the team went over into the crevice. He slammed the snow hook into the ground with all his weight and yelled for the dogs to stop. Miki and Nikki, the two strongest dogs at the rear, skidded to a stop and pulled back on the line. Denali ran to the front of the sled, grabbed the gang line, and dragged the closest set of dogs back up. His tug slewed the sled around and tipped it toward the ice rift, threatening to spill Kumar into the chasm. "No!" Denali screamed as he pulled the hunting knife. Tears streaming from his eyes, he sliced the gang line, letting Aluk and Aga, the two lead dogs, fall into the chasm. Without their weight, the sled righted itself. Denali grabbed the sled and pulled it away from the edge back behind Miki and Nikki. He stared into the eerie darkness below. There was no sign of Aluk and Aga, just the roar and gurgle of rushing water. A big chunk of glacier had calved into the sea and created a rift, cutting deep inland. With the thick blowing snow, Denali couldn't see anything on the far side of the rift. The Tuniat camp could be over there just out of his sight. He whistled and screamed, then listened for a reply. Only the howl of the wind and grumbling water answered. Denali stumbled back to the dogs and gave each of them a reassuring rub before going to his father on the sled. Kumar remained unmoving, his eyes closed. Denali wriggled his fingers down past his father's hood to his neck and felt for a pulse. It was faint, but there. "Father," Denali said, shaking Kumar. "Father, please, wake up. I've lost Aluk and Aga. I can't get to the camp, and I don't know what to do." Kumar remained limp. The ground grumbled and shivered. Oh no. Denali was still too close to the sea and the unstable ice. With his heart flapping like a dragonfish in a net, he pulled all the dogs around to the front of the sled and set them facing inland. He'd have to go that way until he reached the edge of the rift, then he could pass it and come back out to look for the tribe on the other side. After getting the dogs pointed in the right direction, he ran back to the sled. "Hike," he yelled, giving them the command to run. Without the lead dogs to keep the line tight, the other dogs were reluctant to listen to Denali. They whined and turned in circles as if ready to bed down for the night. "No," Denali yelled at them. "We have to go. It's not safe here. Come on. Hike." Once again they ignored him. Groaning, Denali ran to the front of the team, grabbed the line, and pulled, trying to get the sled started and encourage the dogs to go. The sled barely budged. "Come on, Nikki, Miki, help me." He pulled again. Again the sled hardly moved. But Nikki and Miki shook themselves and pressed into their harness, snapping their lines tight. The sled started forward. The other dogs reluctantly got moving. With Denali in the lead, and the dogs helping pull, the sled moved inland into the teeth of the raging storm. As long as Denali walked out front, the dogs kept moving. As often as he tried to go back to the sled, the dogs stopped, and sank to the ground. But Denali didn't want to stop. His father was too hurt and weak. Storm or no storm, Denali had to get him to camp. If that meant detouring inland around the rift, then he'd do it. He put his head down against the wind and snow and forced his body to move, step by step. Always forward. Swimming through the blizzard. Staying where he could see the rift as a black line to his left. Watching it gradually thin. Soon he'd be able to get past it and turn back out toward the sea. Behind Denali, Miki lifted his nose and sniffed. He let out an excited howl and bolted forward. The sled almost hit Denali as it shot after the suddenly loping dogs. Denali jumped to the side at the last moment and grabbed the handbar as it went past. He drew himself up on the runners and let the dogs run inland. They'd picked up some kind of trail. Denali hoped it was the path the tribe had taken. The rift disappeared behind him, and he lost all sense of direction in the dark swirling snow. The team ran on. How long he wasn't sure. But he snapped wide awake when the howling wind vanished and the flying snow fell away behind him. He looked around, but was surrounded by darkness. The dogs stopped, turned in circles to make themselves a sleeping place, and settled to the ground. Denali stamped the snow hook into the ground and backtracked until he could hear the wind and see the snow flying just beyond a crack in the darkness. The dogs had brought him safely into the shelter of an ice cave. Denali ground his teeth and walked back to the sled. The dogs hadn't been following the tribe's trail at all. It was some other trail, probably of a creature that made its home in the cave. He worked the spear loose from the tie downs on the sled and drew the hunting knife. He'd come too far inland to think the dogs had been smelling seals or sea lions. Whatever creature lived here, Denali knew he had to be ready for it. No coaxing or yelling he did would get the dogs moving again until the storm ended. At least he was out of the wind and snow. Denali crouched down beside his father and waited, nerves tense, ears strained to hear the sound of some creature in the cave. The howling wind echoed through the cavern. Now and then the faint sound of ice cracking punctuated the raging storm, but nothing approached. Gradually the wind outside fell silent. The dark clouds lifted, letting in the pale half-light. The dogs remained curled with their fuzzy tails over their faces. Denali stood and surveyed the cave. With the light filtering in, he could see it was much bigger than he first thought. The jagged ice walls towered above his head. The light coming in from outside tinted the ice in shades of blue, accented with crystal patterns. Only a few feet in front of the sled, a giant outcropping of ice protruded into the middle of the space. As he looked up at it, his heart gave a sudden surge like the sea before a windstorm. The form that filled the middle of the cave was not just a random bit of ice, sculpted by wind or water. It was a great white dragon. Majestic and beautiful, and frozen to ice. A female dragon. Her face was narrower than the dragon that had attacked the camp, and her eyes were kind. She lay curled on a nest of soft scales she must have plucked from her own body. The frost patterns on her wings were the most beautiful Denali had ever seen. He only needed one look to know what had killed her. Her hide was shrunken tight against her skeleton. She died of starvation. A feeling of utter loss filled Denali. He let out a wail and sank to his knees. His mind tumbled like snow on the wind. Her mate had come to the camp, but he hadn't attacked any member of the tribe. He'd headed straight to the ice house. Denali had thought his father had lured the dragon there, but that was wrong. The great white dragon had been trying to steal the fish to take back to his mate. Denali knew it in his heart as he stared up at the dazzling beauty of the she-dragon above him. Other than trying to blind those who tried to stop him, her mate had not hurt anyone until Kumar drove the spear into its heart. But even if Kumar had not killed the dragon, there weren't enough fish in the ice house to save its mate. "I'm sorry," Denali said. "I'm so sorry." He sheathed his hunting knife and went to his father. The white dragons were dead, and he couldn't bring them back. The dragon Kumar had killed would have died of hunger soon anyway, just like its mate. Kumar lay wrapped up tight on the sled. Sweat glistened on his face. His eyes were still closed. "Father?" Denali shook him gently. "Wake up. I don't know where we are, and I'm not sure how to find the tribe." "Father?" Kumar's eyes fluttered open, but remained unfocused. "Rajan, I'm going hunting," he said in a slurred voice. "I know you're sick, but I'll find the gold dragons. I promise." Kumar jerked and gasped. "No. Don't shoot," he shouted. "Don't shoot him, please." Denali's heart sank. Nothing his father said made any sense. Kumar's blurry eyes looked up at the great white dragon. He gasped and stared transfixed and shaking. Denali noticed the back of his head where it had slammed against the ice was swollen even worse than before. Blood still trickled from the gash. It was bad. No wonder his father was delirious. "I don't know what to do with this," Denali said. "I've got to get you to Kopik." Kumar tore his feverish eyes from the dragon to look at Denali. "Devaj, what did you do to your hair? Why has it gone black?" Kumar said. "I'm not Devaj, whoever that is. My name's Denali, remember? I'm your son." He untied the bandage and checked the claw wounds on his father's chest. They had started to scab along the edges, but blood still seeped from the deep scratches. No wonder his father was fevered. With a sinking heart, Denali realized his father would die if he couldn't get him to someone who knew how to care for his injuries. "Denali?" Kumar said as if he'd never heard the name before. "You say you're my son? Amar, you foolish man. If only you would have listened." "Denali, where are we?" "The great white dragon's cave," Denali said. It hurt him to think his father had forgotten who he was. Kumar coughed and glanced at the wound on his chest. "I'm dying, Denali." "I know." Denali rubbed the moisture from his eyes so it wouldn't freeze his lashes shut. "When I'm gone, find Amar if you can. You may need him," his father said. Denali shook his head. "Don't talk like that. I'm not going to let you die. There's still time if I can find the camp." Kumar closed his eyes and slipped back into unconsciousness. Denali whistled to wake the dogs from their sleep. The 4 remaining dogs stretched, shook themselves, and stared up at Denali with hungry eyes. "I don't have much," Denali said. He unwrapped the dragonfish and handed one to each of the dogs. His stomach complained. He would have loved to save all the food for himself and his father, but he knew the dogs were the best chance he had to survive and rejoin the tribe. He hoped, despite the storm, they would be able to follow their own trail back to where the fissure in the ice started. The dogs finished the fish in one gulp and whined for more. Denali kept one out for himself, wrapped the rest back up, and secured the bundle to the sled. "Sorry. We have to make it last." Denali scraped the scales off the fish and devoured it almost as quickly as the dogs had. Just as he chewed the last mouthful, a sharp crack came from the nest beneath the she-dragon. Denali crept toward the nest. Lots of things made cracking sounds. Bones breaking, ice breaking, boats breaking. None of them good. Another big crack was followed by softer crackling. Readying the hunting knife in one hand, he hooked his other arm over the lip of the nest and pulled himself up to see inside. A pair of big blue eyes stared up at him and blinked.